Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Well, actually, I just probably exposed myself there. Good evening, everyone. My name is Tahil Sharma, and I'm the Regional Coordinator for North America at the United Religions Initiative. And I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Xander Wagner, who is the Interfaith Chaplain at the University of Laverne. We are very excited to have you all join us this lovely day to take part in the second conversation around building the World House, centering LGBTQ plus voices. For many folks that might be curious about this conversation, Xandra and I wanted to think about a conversation that included all people when thinking about Dr. King's vision of pluralism. And we definitely thought about communities that were involved in terms of their ethnicity and culture. But one thing that we did want to consider is the idea of the culture of communities that are often marginalized. And who better to know this experience among spaces of faith and justice than the LGBTQ community? The spectrum of identities that are sexual and gender-based are often kept at the wayside of the conversations around building a world that is pluralistic and equitable. And today we wanted to take the opportunity to center that identity as a part of this conversation on talking about building the World House. And we have the pleasure of being able to invite some very important voices on this conversation, joining us from various parts of the country. And I want to be very mindful of their time and space, while at the same time giving folks the opportunity to remember that this is an important time for us to be able to talk about the topic of the LGBTQ community, with many laws and pieces of legislation going through state houses alike that are openly and honestly marginalizing the LGBTQ community. As folks who are involved in the work of interfaith cooperation and justice, it is ideal for us to be living up to this value of being inclusive. But sometimes we do such a disservice to ourselves when the only form of that inclusion looks like faith and spirituality. Today, let this be a conversation that invites you to think about the different identities that help you center yourself as an entire person and how you strive for justice accordingly. So with that in mind, I'd like to quickly introduce the speakers in the room today. I will be adding their bios as they speak during the conversation, but starting off with our speaker, Luca Alexander, their pronouns are they and them. They are a doula, a poet, and a theologian. We have Jae Carter, whose pronouns are they and them as well. They are a spiritual creative and a supportive counselor. We also have Honeybee Beloved, whose pronouns are he and they. They are a poet, a mother, and a creative spirit. And we have our co-moderators today, Audri Squat Williams, whose pronoun is she, who's the spiritual director of the Spiritual Enhancement Center, which is a cooperation circle at the United Religions Initiative, and her partner, Karen Hunter Watson, whose pronouns are also she, who is a singer, author, designer, and artist. And without further ado, I'd like to pass it on to our co-moderators. Audrey, Karen, please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tahil. It's and everyone who's present here. I think this is an amazing opportunity that we have to have this conversation. There are some questions that we're going to communicate around, and I want to just open up the first one, which is, what is the story of your intersection that you've brought into this space today? As I think about that, that's a big question for me as I reflect on all the places and spaces in my life. I am of Native and African ancestry. Also have some European ancestry as well. So from an ancestral standpoint, I guess I already stand in that place of intersectionality. Also, I have lived my life in my early years as a child of parents who were very active in civil rights in the 60s. And so as a result of being with my parents, I also had an opportunity to be on the front line with them and have the experience of being one of the first to integrate an all-white school with my brother. So I've had that experience. In my Native experience, it was, and in my African experience also, it was very much learning as much as I could, not what was in the traditional textbooks, but in all the ways that my parents exposed us to knowledge and experiences in our various communities. I think the first time that I got to experience intersectionality from a global perspective was when Karen and I both were on a world walk. We walked around the world for 4 years, and we walked into many situations where our identities as a couple, as a lesbian couple, it was very interesting how we had to identify ourselves as how we showed up in certain communities and in certain parts of the world. So all of that being said, from that point to me, I would end it by just this part of the first question. For me, intersectionality continues to be a space that I look for. How do we, one, identify ourselves in an authentic way? And two, how do we move the needle in our society, in our churches and in our mosque and in all of our religious places, and in community, to really move into the world house, to really become a part of what we're talking about as a pluralistic society. And I question that. So I can't honestly say I have an answer. My question is, can we do this? And I will come back to that as we continue to go forward. So yeah, that would be my answer on this go around. Karen?
Yes, I've had the opportunity to experience this in many ways during my upbringing as a child. I was raised in the North, in the Illinois and Chicago, and things were, there was not a lot that had to, come forward during that time for me there. But what it was that my parents were very religious. And for me to be able to do the things that I felt I needed to do, I wasn't able to do those things unless I broke away from home and did my own thing. So this is kind of what happened for me, whereas I went out and I learned a lot of things, not from home as much as I did probably, which say from the streets. So because of that, it placed me in a lot of positions where when I began to know who I was as a lesbian, then it could have created a lot of problems, but for whatever reason that was, I was able to go forward and go into relationships or around people that didn't seem to bother them, which was good for me because I was very young. But outside of that, when I, came further into my spirituality and I began to see things in a different way, then I began to do things a little differently. And it helped a lot when Audri and I came together to be partners, to go forward and really experience life in a much different way.
Okay. So Luca, how would you respond to this first question?
Yeah, I'll do my best. So I think for myself, I'm situated in terms of a complicated backstory of a ex-Catholic who also has experienced Islam through my mother. I converted to Islam myself at 19. And really found it to be the only space that I personally felt called to. And yet, in response to coming out as queer and trans, I have experienced a fair amount of backlash, whether or not I actually exist, whether or not I can actually situate myself in those intersections. which is really unfortunate and sad considering the history of trans and LGBTQ2IA Muslims that have existed for hundreds of years. So for me, I find myself trying to really take up more space in a way that isn't granted to me through a mosque or through even academic spaces around Islam. Unfortunately, I don't feel like these spaces often are as welcoming as I would love to see them. And while I think there is change, I want to be able to see it come forward so that I can be present too, in a way that's authentic and fulfilling for myself, and not just about me teaching, and constantly giving into others, because I need to be given into as well. So that's where I situate myself.
Thank you. Honeybee.
Thank you, Audrey. I think first and foremost, identify at the intersections of being two-spirit, which is in and of itself an intersection, right? The intersection of spirituality and gender identity, gender expression, right? And so what that means is that I recognize that the world has placed me under a bunch of labels and categories, whether or not I consented to it. And so I move through the world with my body politicized, which in and of itself is a violation of consent, right? But as a two-spirit person, I recognize that I am both of this world and beyond it, right? I am uncontainable. I contain magnitudes. I am a creature of magical proportions. I am a liberation manifesto in flesh. I am the ocean. I am the fucking stars. I'm a Gemini rising, Cancer sun, Leo moon, with a Gemini Venus, and so I have like the biggest heart in the world, and I'm a pit bull with the love that I have for my community, right? And the community that has always accepted me, and always uplifted me, and always poured love into me, and reminded me of the honey part in my name, right? That sweetness, that life, the will to live and to live fully and to fight for everyone's will to live and to live fully comes from a community that has been classified under the LGBTQIA umbrella, right? And all I know is I feel really good in my body when I'm with these people.
Beautiful.
Right.
Beautiful. Thank you. Jae.
Hello. So this question I have struggled with my entire life, and even more so in this space is a struggle. And I'm listening to everybody's answers like, what do I say? My time is coming. And I have no clue how to answer this, because the point in my journey where I'm at is I am so angry at society that I have to conform to all these labels. I have to tell people I'm queer and I'm non-binary and these pronouns. And I just think of myself as a creative, fluid person. Like in this construct of a society, I'm a leader, I'm a healer. I am so many different things that even those words can't really embody who I am. So I struggle with telling people who I am. Rather, I like to show people, as you can see from my background, I'm like, I like my energy to tell people who I am, because I can't really tell people because I'm ever changing. So
Yeah. Yes. I love that, Jae. And that moves us actually, Jae, right into our second question. What are we doing wrong in spaces of faith, spirituality, and justice work that makes it challenging to see social change in sight? Wow, I think that's where I was headed too. I find that I am a nonconformist in terms of identity. And that's sometimes I have I have issues with how we deal with this issue of intersectionality, because if we're claiming all of these individual spaces, are we leaving room for the full expression of who we are, or are we having to sort of morph into what's safe, what's acceptable, to the majority? I mean, is it really pluralism when we have this innate fear of being who we are? And so in this question, even in the sense of faith and spirituality, there can often be so many constrictions in terms of whether you're accepted or not. And I've seen that in, sort of across the board. And I think I can speak from that in terms of my own personal experience, having walked around the world. So for me, it's challenging for me, because I think the answer, and I think this is where the question is going, what are we doing wrong? I think we are limiting who we are as a human family. And if we are truly a loving family, then that means everybody's accepted at the table. And to me, only when we're at that place do we have this, membership into the World House. Mm-hmm. Right now, I'm not sure how much membership we have. So I think the challenge for me that comes up when I think about faith and spirituality is making room for everyone. And that doesn't mean just a sign on the building. That means a place where it's safe to express and to be, and and to feel safe in doing so, and to have room for people to listen. So that's how I feel about faith and spirituality. And in our justice work, in these lines of these areas of intersectionality, I think ultimately we're all crisscrossing like a web all the time. And how we make room for each other in our justice work, I think is a big challenge for us right now. And not just, so sometimes it almost feels like it's the flavor of the month, kind of approach to what gets spoken about, what gets serious consideration in terms of our justice work. So that's what I was feeling in that. And so why don't I swing back to you, Jae, this time, and give you an opportunity to answer that question as well.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny because after you asked the question, you were like, that leads us into this. And I wanted to raise my hand and be like, can I answer? Like, can I say something? But immediately what came to mind is, in these spaces, everybody wants to be right. There's so much ego in this space, and everybody's like, my belief system is right. My belief system is right. My belief system is right. And so there leaves a lot of room for judgment, and a lot of room for invisibility, and a lot of room for like exclusion. Because everybody's so busy with their box, and they're like, if you don't fit into this box, you don't matter. Yeah. And I feel like in these spaces, what we need is a dissolvement, a complete surrender to just, everybody has contributed to this mess. Everybody's belief system is right, because if you believe in it, is right. Like, it exists in some parallel universe or somewhere. And if it's working for you, it's a belief system. It is what it is. But I feel like there's so much punishment in these conversations that people are so afraid to like really exist and be themselves because of all these boxes and nuances and everything. And I feel like the first place to step is everybody just take accountability. We get here, and you know what? We just put it all out there. Everybody just puts all their shit out there, and we go from there. Mm-hmm. Like, we go from an unconditional love perspective. And I know that sounds like far-fetched, and it sounds really like magical and stuff, but I truly believe when you uphold an unconditional love, that judgment, that ego, all of those things don't exist in that space. But a lot of people don't understand what unconditional means, and we're taught conditional with all of our traumas in society. So I feel like in this space, a surrender, a complete, an absolute full surrender of all identities, of all belief system, of all paradigms, and just, that's where we start.
Yeah, beautiful. Honeybee.
I resonate so much with what you just shared, Jay. I love to hear you speak. I really do. Um, yeah, so I think grounding us in love is really, really healthy, wise place to start. So I thank you for that, Jay, because I think that when you're grounded in love, then you're willing to listen, right? You're willing to fight. You're willing to compromise. You're willing to put ego to death, to take accountability, right? We're all a little right and we're all a little wrong. We all can see one piece of the bigger picture. And I think that there are people who are called to be the visionaries, right? There are people who can see uh, the world that we're trying to build so clearly and believe in it so strongly that we're willing to do what I identify as shadow work in my spirituality and to face myself and to take accountability for the places in me broken and confused and to send love to those places, right? Not to stop being cringe, but to stop cringing. Because I don't know how we can even begin to talk about loving your neighbor like you love yourself if you don't love yourself. And I think that we have been poisoned by colonialism and capitalism and hyper individualization. And so we are no longer able to believe in community if we have not seen it for ourselves. But there are people like myself, racialized people, people who come from communities where respect and community are the only things you have, the only legacy for you to inherit. And so we fight for those things and we cling to them. And even when my people in so-called Mexico were being converted against their will to Catholicism, there was certain things that they were unwilling to compromise on. And so they continued to live on in whispers and shadows and echoes within Catholicism. And those are the parts of Catholicism that I still find myself clinging to today, right? When I don't have the answers to these big questions, I pray. I pray and I listen.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Luca.
So I think with this question, the first thing that comes to mind is a image from a TV show that I've been watching called Yellow Jackets. It's pretty morbid if you've seen it, so I apologize. But there's this scene in the very beginning of it where they're serving food, and someone in the room had pointed out, who's serving the food? Who are the people who prepared the food? Who are the people who are sitting at the table? And so I think about that when it comes to this question of like, who gets to actually sit down, and who gets to lead that. And it's more horizontal than I think we're prepared for, especially in regards to needing to really dismantle systems of power and tell people to step down. I think also one of the things that also is being done wrong per se is that we're not celebrating life while it's still around, or waiting for people to die and memorialize them in an idealistic way, rather than holding people accountable or giving them their roses while they're still here. And honestly, I'm too tired in this lifetime to wait for that, And so I'm done waiting for other people to get me that, that hand, that I have to do that for myself. It, it might look like that, but at the very least, I can, if I can count on myself, I want to be able to do that, and celebrate myself while I'm here. So
Beautiful. Karen.
Yes. I've been listening to what everyone's been saying, and I can find for myself that as a African American woman in this society, sometimes as a lesbian, it has been very difficult to do some of the things that I've wanted to do, only because I limited myself. But as I began to look at where I was going and what I wanted to accomplish, then I realized that I had to do things a little differently. Now, I've been somewhat of a rebel most of my life. And so because of that, and you probably couldn't tell that just by looking at me because I'm kind of on the quiet side, but I've always felt like I had to do exactly what it was I wanted to do. And I was always cautious of other people around me, as long as it didn't affect me. But when society and people of that nature begin to try to dictate to me how I'm supposed to be and what I'm supposed to do, then I wouldn't accept that and take that from anyone, including my parents. And as far as religion, well, quite honestly, it got me kicked out of the religion that I was affiliated with during that time, because I just wasn't going to stand for it. I felt like I needed to be who I am. And when I came out for me, a very early age, because I was 19. But I've had and I've been just who I am ever since then. So it's very interesting to see and listen to younger women during this time, because I'm, past the 60 age. And it's been a minute that I've been a lesbian, been a minute that I've been in a same gender loving relationship. And I just feel great about it. So as far as my spirituality is concerned with all of this, I am who I am. I realized early on that Creator accepted me just as I am. And I had to go through that experience in order to find out that it was okay to be me, regardless of what it looked like to others. It's all right to be myself.
Mm-hmm. I would like to interject a question before we go to the last question. Zandra, do we have time, do you think, to do that? Okay, I would like to ask each of you to go into your own deep spaces, and as we think about this issue of the world, not issue, but building the world house, and really thinking about that as something real that we are considering for ourselves. What has been your greatest challenge and your greatest victory on this path of creating a world that works for you and for members of your community? How you've come through this space of it can represent in so many ways for each of us. It could be discrimination, it could be violence, it could be so many different things. How have you come through this and landed exactly where you are right now, and what lessons have you learned? And so, Karen, why don't we start with you, and we'll go around one more time.
What lessons have you, repeat the question, just the question itself.
Basically, what challenges have you had? What have you learned as you've talked about living your life exactly how you knew that you wanted to live your life? What were your challenges? And then I guess the other part of that is, what are the opportunities that can now be a part of helping us build this world house? Okay, I would say the challenges have been that everyone is not acceptable of who I am, but and I've had to go through, it hasn't so much been a racial thing for me, but it's been more of, I'm not quite sure how to explain it. It's been more of people wanting me to be more of who they are and how they are, those people that I was around. And I wasn't willing to do that. So I had to take the opportunity for myself to be just who I am. And I guess, I don't know if I've answered your question, but that's kind of how it was. Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. That's okay. Honeybee.
I love this question. It reminds me of a line from a poem. The poet happens to be in the States with us tonight. It says, "I know what it is like to stomach the hate the world harbors against you, until you feel it too. And not a lot of people know this about my story, but when I was 5-year-old, I survived attempted infanticide. I've known my entire life that I should not be here, and that not only does the world harbor this hate against me, but so do my parents, right? And that capacity for hatred is something that I have been battling my whole life. And it wasn't until this year that I even began to really confront those realities in a real grounded way, in a real examination in my relationships, because I wasn't even in my body. I wasn't even here. And so I was just this like hurricane, this hurricane for the past 20 years. And now I'm able to have my feet planted firmly on the ground and feel the sun on my face and know that the sun knows no imposter, right? That I have been fighting for love my entire life. And that is my gift. The capacity to look in the mirror and to love myself, even when I was not given that love, when every person deserves to be given that love. Every child deserves to be given that love. Every person deserves to know that their breath matters, that their life matters. And I laugh, quite frankly, at the fact that there is an ego so fucking big that they think that they can legislate us out of existence. Like, what planet are you on? Because it's not this one. I'm here. I'm right fucking here. Trans people have always existed, and trans people will exist in the future. We exist here, we exist in the future, we exist in the past. And when we forget ourselves is when they win. And they can continue to try and silence us, but our will to live is something that they will never understand because they've never had to fight for it like us. I'm tired of fucking fighting. I want to live. I want to enjoy peace. I want to enjoy luxury. I should be on a beach somewhere. I should be resting. I should be dreaming and birthing new life, new worlds. That is my call. But capitalism is a cruel imagination, and it gets in the way of who we are called to be because we don't even have time to rest long enough to figure it out.
Thank you, Honeybee. Luca.
Yeah, I really resonate with what you had to share, Honeybee, especially. I mean, we've talked about this outside of this space time and again, but really, I have experienced, I mean, a fair amount of violence as well as just like loss because of who I am, because of I've had to repeatedly come out or whatnot, and I have to come out every day because trans people, especially I would say especially non-binary, gender expansive folks who don't exist in the binaries, frequently have to present themselves as a new and be met with invasive curiosities that aren't coming from a genuine place, that are coming from a place of fear. And yeah, I'm tired of it. I'm wanting to thrive and actually be able to plan beyond tomorrow and really actually, you know, apply to a job where I can just not have to question whether or not I'm going to have to leave because nobody can get my damn pronouns right. And people see an email signature as the solution to that. And I'm like, no, it's a culture change. It's a culture change, a culture shift. You can't change that by putting my pronouns into my email signature. I'm sorry. That's not going to solve the issue. So yeah, I'm tired, but at the same time, I'm ready, ready for something new. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Jae.
You know that saying that I said earlier when I was looking at everybody else and hearing everybody else and I was totally unprepared? It happened again. Don't know what to say to this question. Like challenges, I feel like I entered this world a challenge. Like I entered like my entire existence. The moment I came out the womb was literally like, boom. And now your challenges start. Like I entered in the female binary, and that was an issue since I was a kid. And then I entered as African American. The entire world is anti-Black, already a challenge. And then to make matters worse, I grew up in the foster care system at 2 months. So I was like, I literally came into a world that told me my entire existence, everything's against me. And I'm gonna have to navigate my way through that. And fortunately enough, I have been able to meet really amazing people that have always gravitated towards me to help me get to those spaces that I need to get to. And now I feel like I'm in a place because of all of my challenges that I'm able to speak on these panels. I'm able to tell people, this is my story. I've overcome these things. I can help you overcome these things. I can accomplish my dreams. And now I can stand in a community and start allocating grants and resources and putting people in that space. Like, this is my friend. They would be perfect in this space. And like, okay, you have that money over there. Well, give it to me and let me redistribute it out to these communities and let me start collecting these resources like binders and gender affirming surgery monies and like mutual aids and all those things that I can do with my small platform now and my story. I can now move it out and move it forward rather than just, because I've also been in that place of feeling helpless, but I think where I'm at now, and because of the pandemic and everything, it's now more important now than ever to use my voice and to use my entire existence to come into these spaces like, well, you're wrong, because I refute that statistic. Like, you told me that I have an ACEs score of 10. And if anybody knows the adverse childhood experiences, like if you got a 6 or above, you're statistically proven to like not be successful. And I'm like, well, that's false. Because now I'm sitting here in a master's program telling y'all the same thing. And so I feel like my story, my voice is the way that I now create opportunities and spaces and move this forward.
Yes. I'll answer the question as well. I realized I asked it and kept going. First of all, I just want to honor everybody in your comments and in sharing at such a deep level. I see that as a pathway to the World House. But for me, you know, my greatest challenge was I was so many things all at once, you know, in terms of my origins, my indigeneity, coming from Africa and coming from Turtle Island, and just coming into balance with those two in a world that was totally towards destruction, and being in this body that I am, that is very hard to identify who and what I am. I've had that all my life. You know, it positioned, as I've heard, I think maybe each of you say, that it positions you, that difference, that way the world sees you, puts you in a posture of always kind of being, I know for me, being on guard. And so when I realized that I was in love with a woman, and that was later in my life, you know, and then I had to understand, well, what does that mean? And it really didn't matter to me. It was love was love. And so I had an opportunity to spend a lifetime, over 20 years, with Karen and I doing many of our things together. And often it was because we showed up together as a couple and we never let that go, that we had an opportunity then to be a demonstration. But sometimes you get tired of being, you know, the what do you call it? The demonstration of things. You get tired of being the one that everybody wants to look to and call forward for different things. So, you know, to represent, but at the same time, you're in a position also of having to navigate and the intersections of family, of church, of community, and all in relationship to who you yourself know yourself to be and what it is that you want to gift to the world. So I just thought that by having an opportunity for us to speak, that we could go deeper in our own feelings and the essence of who we are. So thank you, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And the last question is, what is the role of the LGBTQ plus community in building the world house? What would it mean to have us equally represented at the table of humanity?
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Jae.
Funny because I don't have an answer to that, because I really just don't know. Like, the only thing I can think of is on an individual level. I'm gonna continue being myself, and I'm gonna continue being in these spaces, and I'm gonna continue proudly doing that and having these conversations and saying these things. But currently in my space and my aura, I don't know what that looks like on a global level right now, because right now we're still in the mess of like, we don't even know what the entire system and world and the things that we need to like, you know, unpack are. So right now I'm on an individual level and working my way up from there.
Mm-hmm. Honeybee.
This is a challenging question. This is a very challenging question, but I think the mention of resources is a really good point, right? Like I'm a Gemini, and so sometimes I have to like trick myself into certain certain situations by way of curiosity, right? And so I have to get curious around what would it look like um, to have unlimited resources. Like what good could I then do out in the world with unlimited resources? Like that is a question that excites me, right? Because when I first hear this question, I feel stuck. I feel overwhelmed because it's like, God, where do we fucking start? But I think that there's also there's a element to queerness and how radically different it is from the status quo, right? That that queerness and queer folk, in my experience, right, in talking to my community, there's a lot of identifying with the villain in a narrative, right? I love a villain in a story. I love a Medusa. I love La Llorona. Um, Caddy fucking up Maddie in Euphoria. Love that, right? Because sometimes you do have to handle it, right? And I said earlier, right, my community has two things: respect and forgot the second thing. But when your respect is taken from you, and when you have been met with violence, the retaliation is then judged, right? And I'm so angry that that my community continues to be judged for its worst moments, right? When you're so filled with the rage of the disrespect that you cannot you cannot contain yourself, and suddenly you're Will Smith slapping Chris Rock at the Oscars, right? And that's not something that I'm relating to. That's an event that I think we all witnessed or heard about. And so that is an event that I'm like locating for us as an example of what it looks like in the world when you are just so fucking tired of turning the other cheek, of smiling at your oppressors, of fawning, that I sometimes feel so enraged I can't sleep. I am just so livid at the way that my community is being treated. And when I say my community, I'm also talking about, racially, I'm also talking about the disabled community. I'm talking about fat people. I'm talking about any sort of other that you have tried to say is your justification for why you can treat me less than you and feel better about yourself, right? And it is this stratification, it is this hierarchy that has us discombobulated, lost, unaware of our own agency, unaware of our own power, unaware of how we willingly give that power up every day. And nothing is going to change unless you decide that enough is enough.
Yeah.
Everything that has continued to exist exists because we have all collectively decided that it's okay, right? And and whether or not we are aware of that does not denote that fact. Whether or not that is our intent, then that does not denote that fact. And until we have a social obligation, right? And that's why earlier we were talking about love, because that's where that place of social obligation comes from. When you're rooted so deeply in love for yourself that you know when someone is treating you like shit and they got you fucked up, and you know that it's not right. And when we talk about queerness, I think about magic, right? And for me, when there is no justice in the world, that's when I turn to the magic. I turn to the magic in my heart, I turn to the magic in my lineage, and I claim justice for myself in my own way. And sometimes that magic and sometimes that justice for me looks like forgiveness, because I know that I deserve to rest. I know that I deserve to be at peace, and I know that I deserve to sleep. And so I still find a way to carry on, right? But we cannot act surprised that we are here, because we have been saying that we were going to get here all along.
Yes.
Don't insult us.
Mhm.
Don't insult us with your shock. Say it with your chest.
Yeah.
I'm so tired of white Christians in these spaces acting like they're doing me a favor by trying to fit my existence into their theology and telling me that I should be happy that they accept me. I don't want to be accepted. I want to be exalted.
Mhm. Mhm. Wow. Awesome. Thank you. Luca.
Yeah, so this is the tough question, as everyone else has been saying. I think for me, what comes up is accountability and reparations. And as much as those are buzzwords for folks to just throw out there without, backing them up, like, I really mean that. I think that white folks like myself really need to think about what it means to leave behind a legacy, and what does it mean to give back and not take anything with you to the grave. I really think that it also means talking about what we do in this lifetime, to really talk about the fact that there is still a huge hierarchy of power within the LGBTQ2I community, of cis white men with money taking up space, running pride events, running our, I'm from Boston, and I can tell you that there's like a handful of white folks that are running half of the queer and trans events in Boston, and who shows up to those spaces. And it's like we're losing access to those spaces too, but we're also losing access to healthcare, to spiritual spaces, because of because of especially a lot of cis white folks taking up space and absolutely not reflecting on what it means to do that and repeat that harm over and over again.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand.
Okay. Karen.
Yeah. I was just listening to everyone, and I was listening to Honeybee, and she was hearing the things that she was saying. I can really relate to it. I understand being angry. I understand not appreciating how people want to put you in a box and leave you there in that box, but what I had for myself, I look at it that for me, the best thing to do is to be the best of who I am. I have to be the very, very best that Creator has put in me, and have people to know that just who I am is just who I am, and that I can do those things that that I'm being called to do in this position that I'm in, or in this skin that I'm in this body that I'm in, because this is the way I was created, and it's not it's not accidental. Nothing is an accident in that case. I don't see it as an accident. I feel that I was placed here in order to be the best of me, so that people can see that it's all right to be queer. It's all right to be different. It's all right because that's what you call it, being different. But you don't have to conform to what everyone else wants you to be. You be exactly who you are. And this is what I've had to do my entire life, is to know that I'm all right the way I am. And it hasn't been an easy road. It hasn't always been peaches and cream. I have come up against violence. I've come up against a lot of things, but through it all, I've come to this place where I know exactly who I am. And I know I'm a creation of the Creator. I have been created by a divine being that has placed me here to do exactly what I'm doing. So I feel good about that. I feel really good about that. I just have to continue to be the best of who I am. And I think that this helps us to be able to continue to build that world house where everyone can come together and be together in harmony and love, because that, unconditional love, that's it. And we all have it. We all have to just bring it forward in any way that we can. But it's always in being the best of who we are, and not changing who we are, but bringing ourselves just as we are. And then allow people to say, okay, it's not so bad after all. But then if they don't, it's all right too, because we know everybody's not going to be the same.
Mhm. Thank you, Karen. Yeah, as I was listening to different responses to the question, my first reaction to the question, what is the role of the LGBTQ plus community in building the World House? I kind of felt that, well, I was like, is it really our responsibility to do that? That we have our part to play, but I don't think that we can take on the responsibility of that for ourselves when it's so many of the opposing forces to even our own identity that that makes us dream with fear, love with fear, live with fear, constantly affirming ourselves in whatever ways that we can, and learning to love ourselves and care for ourselves. So I see that all of that came forward to me, but the more I listened deeply into what was being said, I also had a sense that it's loving it comes down to, as Honeybee said, as you said, and others, it really is about loving ourselves, and at the same time, standing in the power of who we are. And, we have to remember that in order for this world house, from my perspective, to truly be built, it's going to take a whole lot of people doing a whole lot of work. And when I say that, we have the white males, that that patriarchy that has to shift. It has to be brought down in the sense of the equal share that needs to happen in our community. So I thought that was very important. I also feel that it's very important that we recognize that even within ourselves, we can't blame everybody in our community. We can't be insensitive to our journeys. We have to really stand in that place of intersectionality and allow voices to be heard, and allow those things that nobody wants to hear to come forward. And when we can do that and be accepted in that, then I think we will be on our way to building the world house. I personally know that we have many, many obstacles to overcome. Hate has been so deeply rooted in our society, hate of anything that's other, and how we can work to build this world house, to me, begins, we got to build a new foundation before we can build that house.
Mhm.
And what would it mean to have us equally represented at the table of humanity? You know, I think that whole question of equality is something that we have to look into ourselves. I know for me, I considered myself to be equal when I couldn't sit in the theater downstairs and watch a movie. I had to sit upstairs during segregation. I considered my equal when I had to be the first to integrate a school. I considered myself to be equal when I fell in love with my wife. And I still consider myself to be an equal under any circumstances. So I think claiming it and owning it is important, and helping each other, pull each other through this very difficult and challenging time. Sometimes our religion and our spirituality isn't there for us. And so we have to find that within ourselves and again, bring ourselves through. And so maybe the building of the World House, we'll see in lifetimes to come. I'm not so sure. I'm convinced that I will see it in my lifetime, but I will keep working towards that end.
Mhm. Mhm.
Thank you all. And Tahil, Alexandra.
Can I say one thing before we move on that feels important? There was a moment when Karen was addressing me and did not use my pronouns, and I feel like that is something that I'm no longer willing to allow to pass without acknowledging, and I felt like I needed to name that.
Okay, I apologize to you for that.
Thank you,
Mhm.
Karen.
Mhm.
So just so that everyone knows, we're planning to go till about 6:15. And one just final question before we, Tahil will take it from here. Just something that's important and beautiful to me about today's panel is it's intergenerational. And I just wonder if not everyone needs to respond to this, but just what does it mean to you to have an intergenerational queer space? And what does it mean for the World House? Anything you might want to comment about that? Yeah, go ahead, Honeybee.
I had to make a difficult decision in the name of self-love and cut off ties with my blood family last year when I came out, and having been a part of such a large intergenerational community, and I'm talking like my grandma's siblings and all of their grandkids, like we all grew up together. It was a very extended intergenerational home, and so I've seen what it looks like when someone needs help breastfeeding, or someone needs help changing a diaper, or someone needs help getting an elder into their vehicle, making sure an elder gets to their doctor's appointments. I've lived into those realities and I know what they look like. But I don't know what they look like in the queer community, right? Because our queer elders, so many have been taken from us through negligence, through medical violence, through medical erasure. And I think all the time about, as a doula, you know, how am I going to shepherd these queer families into parenthood without that piece, right? Without elders to show you how and to pour into you and let you know that you're not like making a total mess of things, you know, like that there's a certain wisdom and just life experience, and I just don't have the years. And so I'm grateful, even as we like bring our elders into our realities, right? And say these are our boundaries and these are our pronouns and we want you to use them, and we still love you and we're really excited that you're here, and thank you for sharing your wisdom, because it gives hope to know that I'm here and that there's somewhere beyond here for me to be.
Beautiful.
Thanks, Jay.
Piggybacking off of that gratitude comment, that's what came up for me when you asked that question. Because in my life, I feel so disconnected from the world, and that's just my own kind of just energy in the world. But I never thought of this concept of having queer elders until I was in my aging class, and we had to watch this video on the queer aging community, and it completely dawned on me that we have completely dismissed this entire community, but none of our existence would be here had it not been for this entire queer elder community. So the fact that I'm able to start meeting them and include them in conversations and have conversations with to me connects me to my ancestors, because I know I'm not the only radical fluid being that's in my ancestry. So to me, it connects me to my lineage. It connects me to the past lives. It connects me to the present. It connects me to the future. And although I won't see the change that I want to see in my lifetime, I'm going to be a queer elder, and I'm going to pass it down to the next generation. And that next generation is going to be a queer elder until, you know what, it gets to the damn place that it needs to get. So at this point, I gratitude and love, and I can't wait to continue taking up these spaces, because the more we can work together in these spaces, the better we know we can get to, you know, that magical place. But let me not take it there. But yeah.
Is there anyone else that wanted to speak to that? Audri, yeah.
I would just like to say, just being here together, I am so in awe of everyone on the panel. I know that it's hard to get a full sense of each other in such a short period of time. However, I hear so much that just brings me joy. And Karen and I often talk about creating space where we have a house where all of our daughters and sons can come and be together and feel free and be able to express and talk about what's important. And just to know they have a safe space just for time out if necessary. And just being here, this was a safe space. This was an opportunity, an intergenerational opportunity. And I'm very grateful. I just wanted to make sure I said that.
Tahil, I'll turn this over to you.
There's just so much gratitude to share in this space right now, from folks that I see as friends, to now who I see as my mentors, to those elders in the community who I've always shown deep appreciation for, who I now can see in a more powerful light, and to everyone who's here today who is willing to listen, who is willing to be uncomfortable, and who is willing to share time to learn that building the world house is not an overnight experiment. To include people, to accept them, to humanize them, and to help them thrive takes a long, long process. And it was great to be able to just get a smidge, an iota of what that might look like when we can finally make community thrive rather than just make it a talking piece for folks to pay attention to. So I want to give people a couple of minutes to just quietly reflect on what you've been thinking about today as you've been hearing this conversation. What we want people to do in the next couple of minutes is think about these two questions that I'm about to ask, and actually write out responses for them that if you would like to share them in the chat below, you're more than welcome to do so. If you'd like to send it to Xander or myself privately as a part of your reflection, because you don't just want to share it out to other folks, we'll give you that flexibility as well. But we want you to share some response to these two questions. The first question is, what's something that you've learned today that's giving you a perspective on working to help equalize the LGBTQ community? What is something that you're taking away from this conversation today? Oh yes, sure, Cheyenne, I'll be happy to do that. What's one lesson from today's conversation that will help you to do to do the work of equalizing the LGBTQ community. So as I am saying this, I'm also writing it, so please excuse the typing. So let me send that. And the second question is, what's one action that you will do back in your community to make sure that LGBTQ people are equalized? What is one action that you'll commit to when you go back to your communities that will help you to equalize the LGBTQ community? There's no right answer, but there is an opportunity for you to find the answer that makes the most sense for the communities that you come from. It's not easy to think about ways to learn today, and it's not easy to think about ways to make this action immediate when you go back to your faith community, your ethnic and cultural community, your campus community, your community of friends and family who may find things uncomfortable when the topic of LGBTQ individuals comes up. But this is an opportunity for you to make some of that lasting impact, which will take generations, as Honeybee and Audri and others were saying, about actually finally manifesting that world house to what it really is. Practicing unconditional self-love, speaking up for students if they get misgendered or mistreated. Thank you for that, Marcus. Thank you so much, Alice, for coming. So appreciated.
I think personally, like for me, I'll probably pull away from like assuming things about people. So like we're all human, we're all people. We all are so like we're so focused on like labeling things that we should just focus on loving each other. And I think as my family's Hispanic, so there's a lot of stereotypes that we go into with in terms of like people and how people should behave. And I have been trying to correct them in that sense, especially like my older family members and stuff. So I feel like personally, I'm going to try to advocate just towards loving people and not labeling things in such negative or even positive like ways, because we're all us and we're all unique. So it's just a matter of being able to accept one another for who we are, despite all the biases and despite everything we hear. So I'm very grateful for you guys speaking up. Like I really think I gained more perspective on like how people should be more united and how we're all our own individual and spiritually, physically, like we shouldn't be labeled in any way, shape, or form.
Thank you for sharing that, Kimberly. And it makes me think of one particular dichotomy that we unfortunately put ourselves in sometimes. Jae put this actually really succinctly in a ways that I don't think I could do justice, but it's really a strange place to be in when, you know, you are just trying to be yourself. And it's very hard to define who that self is because it is so complicated and nuanced and filled with a history that's hard to explain. And at the same time, when people are not even willing to give you the benefit of the doubt of those experiences and those identities, they're so willing to also dismiss that makes you uniquely you. And I think what we need to invite people to think about is, how do we acknowledge a better approach to individuality and unity in the same space? And I think that's one of the most unfortunate things that we do in faith and justice spaces, that I think could use a lot more detail, could use a lot more conversation. It should not be hard for us to be acknowledged as the individual creations that we are, because we are in this material reality very separate and very unique from each other. But the uniting essence is that we all deserve to thrive, that we all deserve justice, that we all deserve to stand and breathe and live without any hesitation or hindrance from others around us. And to be able to do that is a challenge, but it's something that we have to explore as communities more and more often, because the more we define this diversity and inclusion as something that makes us a bastion for, a better tomorrow, we have to really do the hard work of acknowledging that we don't live in the same way on this planet. And we have to do a better job of making sure that we deserve a better way of living on this planet for all of us together. So I'm really appreciating all of the reflections that are coming in. I hope they keep coming in as they come to mind for you. But now we'd like to take this opportunity in the next, 5-7 minutes or so to be able to get some questions from our audience today. We want to be very intentional about making sure that you all have a piece of this conversation too, not just as listeners, but as folks with your own experiences as well. So if anyone would like to put a question in the chat, or if they would like to raise their hand, please, by all means, we invite you to do so. I will actually ask a question then, because I am compelled to do so. One thing that I think became very clear in the story of everyone's intersections was a story of some impact by faith and spirituality. Some of you consider yourselves ex-Christians. Some of you walk on the path of Indigenous wisdom. Some of you are still in your, budding forms of what spirituality might look like. And I'm very curious as to something specific from this spiritual religious journey that you've been on that's helped you own this LGBTQ identity of yours. I'm not going to say that all religious expressions are very accepting of LGBTQ identity. We know this as a truth, unfortunately, but we know that when communities and when people acknowledge their connection to the divine, that they know of the ways in which they are able to thrive in the identity that they exist in. So I'm curious from both the moderators and the speakers, what's been something that you've sort of held on to as your anchor from your tradition, as a scripture or as a message that's helped you get through, challenging times? Dave, please.
I could go. So I don't have a saying, more so music is the thing that kind of gets me through. That's sort of my go-to. But this song that's coming to mind is Free Mind. And my philosophy is peace of mind. I don't care how crazy I look to everybody. I don't care what I look like to everybody. I don't care if my LGBT, queer, whatever identity you want to give me makes you uncomfortable. If it gives me peace of mind, I'm doing it. Because at the end of the day, my existence, I'm the one that has to deal with my existence, not anybody else. Like, I'm the one that has to go to someone else for nurturing. But at the end of the day, when I go to sleep at night and when I wake up, I'm by myself. So if I'm not at peace with myself, if I'm not happy, I can't do it. I don't have the space for it. And I think that's what's kind of paralleling me into forward into life. And that's something I learned in my spirituality. Like, I consider myself spiritual, non-religious, but my spirituality encompasses different religious views from different people that I've learned. Like, I'm like, oh, like with Xandra, I had a conversation and her religious views is love. And I'm like, I can dig that. I your Christianity is love. That's something that I also agree with. So I'm going to go ahead and incorporate as part of my spirituality. And that's kind of how I get through life, with ever religious spiritual belief and whatever gives me peace of mind and allows me to exist freely. That's what it is.
I feel like in terms of self-acceptance, the more that I have researched my lineage and my tribal history, my tribal practices, the more evidence I see of this two-spirit identity being very much the role of what we might call a pastor, right? A spiritual leader in the community, right? And in some ways, this answers your question, Cheyenne, which I love. Such a good question. You could totally tell a writer wrote it, which is that I do identify with the high priestess card, right? I am the conduit, right? I am the channel. I require rest. I require peace, and the things that help me get to those places are the plants, the wisdom of the land, um, the four elements: fire, water, air, earth, all come together to make a pot of tea, to smoke a bong, to create pottery, right? These creative things, these things that ground me into myself and help me understand myself. Because the more that you understand who you are, the more you're able to recognize when people tell you who you are not, and you're able to draw a line in the sand for yourself. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Tahil, this is Audrey. I'd like to make a comment as well.
Yes, please, by all means.
I was sitting here and I was thinking about Audre Lorde, and I think one of her quotes, if I'm correct, is "Without community, there is no liberation." And so what that inspires me to do, and has inspired me to do most of my adult life, is being mindful of creating open and safe spaces for our community. And that allows us to then begin to build community and nurture community, not just in the short run, but looking, what's the long end? What's the long game? Who's going to be there after I'm gone? Who's the next that's going to keep this going so that we can achieve the liberation that I think that the World House invites.
Thank you for that, Audrey. Yes, Karen.
Yes. Yes, I like to say, thinking about that from the very early parts of my development in my spirituality, I learned that spirit let me know very distinctly, because I had a connection with spirit where I didn't try to connect through a church or any of that, but I'd had that direct connection through prayer, through meditation, that type of thing. And what it did for me was it helped me to know that it was all right for me to love spirit just the way it was, and that spirit loved me just the way I am. And that was the part that I got really early on. It didn't matter what my sexuality was, any of that. All it mattered is that I had that connection with spirit, and that I was able to love the divine with everything that was in me. And that's what I did. And that's what I do.
Luca, did you want to add anything? Uh, Luca, you're muted, by the way, so we can
There we go. That's why. No, not at the moment. That's all I was trying to say.
It's all good. And I think with that shared wisdom, does anyone else have time for one more question? Well, seeing none, I think I would like to once again just share gratitude with Honeybee, Luca, Jay, Audrey, Karen. Thank you all so much for the beautiful conversation that you've blessed us with today. We want to thank every single person in this room who was able to take part in this conversation, coming from various communities around the country. I'm immensely thankful to Zandra and the University of Laverne for collaborating with the United Religions Initiative in making conversations like this possible. Also very thankful to the Episcopal Diocese of Los Angeles and the Interfaith Youth Corps for their support of this kind of programming. It's very important to have faith communities and interfaith organizations alike support the message of inclusion in a way that is honest and that is brutally honest in I think the ways that we needed to hear. Um, and most importantly, please remember that building the World House once again is not an overnight task. We hope that each of you finds your way of being able to build this house over time so that our posterity, our future generations will find some peace that we aren't able to find at this time. So thank you, every single one of you, for coming today. And we wish you just blessings of peace and healing and rest as we enter the weekend. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank
Peace
you.
and love.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure, y'all. Have a great night.
Thank you,
Good
Honeybee.
Thank you, Honeybee. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Have a great night.
Have a great night. Please take care.
Peace and love all.
Sandra, do you want to stay on for a minute?
Sure.
Right here. I got you. Just came through.
Okay, let me stop recording just a second here.